The rowdy crowd of dust-worn men hushed as a young woman was hauled onto the crude auction block, a burlap sack hanging over her head and shoulders. The Arizona Territory sun of 1878 beat down. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The dry wind kicking grit around her torn dress, every stitch showing the hardship she'd endured. Step right up, gentlemen, fresh off the wagon train from back east, Ephraim Tate. The auctioneer bellowed, his face slick with sweat that glistened in the afternoon light. Untouched goods, strong young fit for whatever labor or pleasure you've got in mind. Laughter rolled through the miners and drifters, their meaning plain as day. Jack Rawlins felt his jaw tighten as his eyes locked on the trembling figure. The wind caught the tails of his trail-worn duster as he moved forward. Bride auctions like this had become common sport in Silver Creek, a rough-and-tumble town where the sheriff always seemed to disappear when trouble took the stage. "Let's open the bidding at $20, Tate barked, jerking the rope tied around the girl's wrists. 20, someone shouted. 25, another man called. The numbers climbed quick, 50, 75 men hooting and elbowing each other as if they were bartering for a mule. The girl didn't move her face, hidden her life being sold to the highest hand. 100, came a gravelly voice. Jack knew it at once. Darius Kane, the hard-fisted silver baron who chewed through workers and women alike, most of them vanishing before a year passed under his roof. 100 going once, Tate began. 200. Jack's voice rang out sharp as a rifle shot. Head snapped his way, eyes narrowing. Well, Tate chuckled, showing yellow teeth. Looks like we've got ourselves a real contender. 200 from the cowboy in the back. 250. Kane snarled, his face flushing red. Jack pushed forward until he stood square at the front. 500. His tone was flat final. The crowd gasped. 500 was a fortune out here. She ain't worth half that, Kane spat in the dirt. But Tate's eyes went wide at the sum. 500 once. Twice. Sold to Jack Rawlins. Jack dug into his leather pouch, counting out the hard-earned bills he'd been saving to grow his little ranch. Some things meant more than land. He handed the money over. She's all yours, Rawlins. Tate leered, winking in a way that made Jack's stomach twist. Enjoy the merchandise. Jack ignored him, taking the girl's bound hands gently. Come with me, miss. You're safe now. Her steps were shaky, but she followed. The heat of 100 stairs trailed them until Jack stopped at his horse, away from the mob. I'm gonna take that sack off if that's all right, he said softly. I won't hurt you. No reply came, so he lifted the rough cloth away. His breath caught. Copper hair spilled free, framing a face too fine for this cruel earth, and her eyes green as spring leaves in morning light held a strength that shone through the fear. An angel, he muttered before he could stop himself. Her eyes narrowed with caution. Are you going to hurt me? The eastern lilt in her voice was steady, though thin with worry. Jack shook his head. No, ma'am. I bought your contract to free you. You can walk away if you want. He drew his knife, and she flinched. Easy. Just cutting these ropes. He slit the bindings, and she rubbed her raw wrists. I've nowhere to go, she whispered. They took everything. What's your name? Jack asked. Clara Belle Monroe. I'm Jack Rawlins, he said, pulling his hat off, suddenly self-aware of the trail dust and the 3-day beard. I've got a small ranch an hour's ride. You can rest there till you figure your next move. I'll take the barn. Clara studied him. Her choice weighed heavy. Why did you help me, Mr. Rawlins? Jack replaced his hat, uneasy. Because what they were doing was wrong. Folks aren't cattle to be sold. Her lips trembled toward a smile. Not many men would throw away $500 for principal. It's just money. Jack shrugged. Earned again easy enough. A commotion rose. Kane was bearing down, flanked by 2 minors. Rawlins, he barked. I wasn't finished bidding on that girl. Jack stepped between Clara and the men. The auction's done, Kane. She's not for sale. Kane sneered, hand drifting toward his holster. Everything's for sale in Silver Creek. Not today, Jack replied, even as his pulse hammered. He wasn't born a gunfighter, but 4 years out here had taught him to stand his ground. You think you're better than us? Kane's face twisted. This talk's finished, Jack said evenly. Miss Monroe's leaving with me peaceful-like, unless you'd rather explain to the marshal why you're stirring up trouble. Kane's eyes narrowed, weighing the risk. The marshal might overlook auctions, but open assault on a respected rancher was harder to wash away. This ain't over, Kane spat, backing off. Nobody crosses me in my town. Jack Rawlins gave a cool nod, though inside he knew full well he'd stirred up a hornet's nest. He lifted Clara Belle Monroe onto his horse, swung up behind her, and set his arm gently at her waist to steady her as they rode out of Silver Creek. She sat stiff as a board at first, every muscle taut with unease. But the farther they left that lawless town behind, the more she eased against him. After a long silence, her voice came soft. Thank you. You're welcome, Miss Monroe, Jack said, though she couldn't see his faint smile. Clara, she corrected quietly. After what you've done, you can call me Clara. Clara, he repeated, letting her name roll over his tongue. She told him she'd come from Boston. Her father, Dr. Horace Monroe, had died half a year earlier, leaving her family swallowed in debt. She'd been headed west to stay with her aunt Virginia Bell Carter in San Francisco. Her voice faltered as she confessed, 3 days ago, bandits struck our wagon train. They killed the men, took what they pleased, and dragged us away. Jack's grip on the reins tightened. I'm sorry, he said. They split us up. I don't know where the others are. I was brought here last night. The desert was quiet, but for the steady rhythm of hooves. The sunset washed the land in fire, red, and gold. My spread isn't much, Jack finally said. 1 house, a barn, a patch of fence, and horses, mostly Mustangs. It sounds wonderful. Clara answered, her tone heavy with exhaustion. We'll be there soon. You'll have a hot meal and a real bed. When they topped the ridge, Jack's chest swelled with pride. His modest homestead stood against the mountains, a corral of horses at its side, a small garden patch near the porch. Welcome to the Double R, he said. It's plain, but it's home. Clara stared at the little ranch like it was a safe haven sent from heaven. Jack helped her down, leading her into the cabin. Inside the place was simple, a stone fireplace, a rough kitchen corner, 1 bedroom, and a storage room he'd once turned into quarters when his brother Nathaniel had stayed. Jack lit a lamp. You'll take the main room. I'll set it right for you. I couldn't take your bed, Clara objected. The other's too small, just a storeroom. And after all you've been through, I won't hear of you sleeping anywhere but a proper bed. Too weary to argue, she sank into a chair while he stripped his own things from the bedroom and laid down fresh sheets. When he returned, her head was resting on folded arms at the table. Clara, he said softly, the room's ready. She blinked those green eyes up at him. Thank you, Jack, for everything. There's water by the bed, he said. I'll fix us something warm. He stirred beans and bacon, setting out the cornbread he'd baked. When Clara came back, her face and hands were clean, copper hair falling in loose waves. They ate mostly in silence, she too tired for talk, Jack unsure of words fit for her. Later she thanked him once more and slipped into the bedroom. Jack unrolled a blanket by the fireplace. Lying awake, staring at the beams in the fire's glow, he knew life had shifted the moment he pulled that sack from her head and saw the face of an angel. Clara awoke to a room she didn't know. For a heartbeat, panic flared until yesterday's nightmare returned. The auction. The sack. The cowboy who saved her. Sunlight spilled across clean sheets. A sturdy bed, a washstand with pitcher and basin, and a small mirror on the wall. Her ruined dress lay crumpled like a bad memory. A knock sounded. "Miss Monroe, you awake?" "Yes," she answered, pulling the blanket close. "I left some clothes by the door." Jack's voice came through. "They belonged to my sister-in-law, Ruth Ann Rawlins, before she and Nathaniel moved on to Colorado. They'll fit you better than mine." His steps faded. Clara opened the door to find a calico dress undergarments and worn but sound boots. She dressed quickly, relieved to shed the rags she'd been forced to wear. When she entered the main room, the smell of coffee and frying bacon met her. Jack turned from the stove, a smile softening his rugged face. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," Clara replied, self-conscious, as his eyes took her in. "Thank you for the clothes." "They suit you," he answered, turning back to the skillet. "Breakfast's nearly ready. Hope you've got an appetite." At the small table, Jack watched her eat 2 hearty helpings, pleased to see color returning to her face. "You needed that," he said. "I haven't eaten properly in days," Clara admitted. Jack said nothing, but his eyes told her he understood. "You needed that," Jack Rawlins said, as Clara Belle Monroe finally pushed her plate aside. "I haven't eaten a real meal in days," she admitted. "Those outlaws tossed us just enough scraps to keep us breathing." Jack's jaw tightened. "If I knew which gang—" "It doesn't matter now," Clara cut in quickly, unwilling to drag herself back through those memories. "What's done is done." "Do you recall anything?" "The law ought to know," Jack pressed. Clara closed her eyes for a moment. There were at least 10 of them. Their leader had a scar across his cheek, and they all wore red scarves. Jack's fork clattered against his tin plate. "The Red Scarf Gang. They've been bleeding this territory dry for months." "You know them only by reputation," Jack muttered. "They've hit wagon trains and small towns alike. The marshals had a posse chasing them, but they vanish into this land like smoke." He hesitated before adding, "Clara, I think you should stay here till they're run down. It's not safe to travel with that gang loose." She looked at her hands. "I need to reach my aunt in San Francisco. She'll be worried sick when my wagon train doesn't arrive. I'll send a wire from Silver Creek," Jack offered. "Let her know you're safe." Clara nodded gratefully. "And I should find work soon. I can't take advantage of your kindness forever." "You're not imposing," Jack said firmly. "There's no rush. You've been through hell. Rest first, we'll figure the rest later." After breakfast, he walked her around the Double R. Compared to the sprawling cattle outfits, it was modest, but every fence post and beam showed care. The barn stood sturdy. The corral was solid, and about 20 horses grazed inside. "They're beautiful," Clara breathed, as several Mustangs trotted over curious about the newcomer. "Wild stock, mostly," Jack said with pride. "I rope them out of the herds, then break 'em gentle before selling to ranchers or the cavalry." A black stallion came up, eyes sharp and knowing. "That's Midnight. Best horse I've ever handled." Clara held her hand out carefully. The stallion sniffed, then nudged it with his nose. "He likes you," Jack said, surprised. "Strangers usually put him on edge." "I've always had a knack with horses," Clara admitted. "My father kept several for his medical rounds back in Boston. Your father was a doctor." She nodded. "One of the best. But he knew more about saving lives than keeping books. When he died, creditors took everything." Jack leaned on the fence rail. "So that's why you were headed west, a fresh start." "In part," Clara said. My aunt wrote that San Francisco was booming with need for educated women as teachers or companions. I thought I might find work there. You're educated then? She smiled faintly. My father believed women deserved the same schooling as men. I studied at the Boston Female Academy till I turned 18. Jack gave a low whistle. Explains why you carry yourself different from most women out here? Different doesn't always mean better, she said softly, eyes on the endless horizon. Book learning doesn't count for much on the frontier. Don't sell yourself short, Jack said. Brains are worth plenty anywhere. He tipped his hat. I need to ride into Town Supplies in that telegram. You think you'll be all right here a few hours? Clara nodded, though her shoulders tensed. I'll be fine. There's a shotgun inside the door, if trouble comes, Jack told her, his tone serious. And Ob Finch, my ranch hand, should be back from his sister's by noon. He stays in the cabin past the barn. I didn't realize you had help, Clara said. Just Ob. He's old but knows horses better than most men alive. Been off helping his sister, her husband busted his leg in a mine cave-in. Jack adjusted his hat. I won't be long. Make yourself at home. When he rode out, Clara turned her eyes on the cabin. It was neat but bare, lacking the gentle touch that made a house feel lived in. Acting on impulse, she rolled up her sleeves. She swept the floorboards, washed the tin dishes, and straightened the main room. In the pantry she found beans and vegetables enough for a stew and set it simmering on the stove. By noon the place smelled of warm food and fresh wildflowers she'd picked and set in a jar on the table. So deep in her work, she didn't hear footsteps until a knock startled her. Jack's warning about the shotgun came to mind, and she approached cautiously. Hello? Called a gravelly voice. Rawlins, you in there? Summoning courage. Clara opened the door. An old man with weathered skin and kind eyes stood on the porch. Well now, he said, tipping his hat. You ain't Jack. No, Clara answered. I'm Clara Belle Monroe. You must be Ob Finch. The old cowboy nodded, surprised. That I am, miss. Jack around. He rode into town, Clara explained. Said you'd be back today. Ob studied her carefully. Don't recall Jack saying anything about a lady guest. It's a recent turn of events, Clara replied, giving a softened version of her ordeal. Ob's hard face gentled. Well, Miss Monroe, Jack Rawlins is as good a man as this country's got. You're in safe hands here. You're in safe hands here, Ob Finch said kindly. I believe that Clara Belle Monroe answered with quiet sincerity. Would you like some coffee? It's fresh. Obe tipped his head. Don't mind if I do. They sat together at the table while Clara poured the dark brew and cut some leftover cornbread. The old cowhand's voice carried the sound of weathered years as he spun stories of the early days in the territory and of Jack Rawlins riding in 4 years back with little more than grit and a black stallion. Most folks gave him 6 months before he'd tuck tail and head back east, Ob said, shaking his head. But he proved them wrong. Built this place from nothing. He seems very capable, Clara remarked. Ob chuckled. Stubborn is what he is, but stubborn in a good way. He sipped his coffee. This place has been awful quiet since his brother Nathaniel and Ruth Ann left for Colorado. It'll do him good having someone besides this old cowpoke around. Before Clara could answer, the sound of hooves broke the stillness. Jack rode in dismounted and came through the door with arms full of parcels. His face softened when he saw them at the table. I see you two got acquainted, he said, setting his burdens down. Miss Monroe's been keeping me entertained, Ob said, rising. Best get back to them horses. They've probably forgotten the meaning of work after a week of my sister's pamperin'. When Obe left, Jack took in the cabin, noting the swept floors, tidy shelves, and the scent of stew simmering. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to, Clara said simply. It's the least I can do for your kindness. Jack hung his hat on the peg by the door. I sent the wire to your aunt. Operator said it'll reach San Francisco in a day or two. "Thank you," Clara replied. Then she asked, "Any trouble in town?" A shadow crossed Jack's face. Darius Kane was there. Didn't speak, but I felt his eyes on me the whole time. "I've brought danger to you," Clara whispered. Jack shook his head. "Kane and I were never on friendly terms long before yesterday. Don't fret on my account." Still, as she ladled out the stew she'd prepared, Clara couldn't help but feel she had placed trouble on this man's doorstep. Yet beneath her worry, something else stirred an awareness of Jack himself. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the steady strength in his hands, the quiet surety of his movements. Feelings she dared not allow were already taking root. Once her aunt replied, Clara told herself she would leave for San Francisco. Her time at the Double R would become nothing more than a fond memory. That evening, as they ate together, Jack spoke of his hopes for the ranch, the horses he planned to add, the breeding lines he dreamed of starting. Clara found herself leaning into his words, offering thoughts of her own, and to her surprise, Jack listened as though her ideas mattered. In Boston, being this close to an unmarried man would have sparked scandal. But out here in the raw wilderness, the connection between them felt more vital than society's rules. "Tell me about your life back east," Jack said, his voice low in the glow of the fire. "Who was Clara Belle Monroe in Boston?" She gazed into the flames. "After my mother passed, when I was 12, I kept the household running and helped my father, Dr. Horace Monroe, with his medical work. I organized his papers, mixed his simples, and even assisted with patients when his nurse was away." "So you know medicine?" Jack asked. "Some," Clara admitted. "Not formal training, but enough. I can set a bone stitch, a wound, recognize illnesses." "Useful skills out here," Jack said thoughtfully. "Nearest doctor's 2 days' ride in Tucson." He paused, then added, "What about you? What brought you west?" Silence lingered. Clara wondered if she'd gone too far. At last, Jack spoke, his eyes still on the fire. "I was engaged once back in Missouri. Her name was Elizabeth. We had dreams of a farm, a family. But influenza swept through and she was gone before we ever had the chance." His voice roughened. "After that I couldn't stay. My brother Nathaniel urged me west for a fresh start." "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. Jack nodded at her sympathy. "We built this place together. Then he met Ruth Ann, they married, had a child, and moved to Colorado. As for me, this land's in my blood now. Too much of me is here to ever leave it." He looked straight at her. "What about you? Anyone waiting for you in Boston?" Clara smiled sadly. "There was a young doctor who worked with my father. He showed interest once, but when father died, and the debts came due, his interest died just as fast." "Sounds like you're better off without him," Jack said firmly. "Perhaps, but at the time it felt like one more loss in a year full of losses." They sat in silence, the fire burning low, each lost in their thoughts. At length, Jack rose and laid another log on the flames. "It's getting late," he said. "You should rest." "Yes, of course. Good night, Jack." "Good night, Clara." Lying in bed, Clara's mind betrayed her. She found herself imagining what it might be like to stay at the Double R, to carve out a life in this harsh but beautiful country. A life with Jack Rawlins. The thought should have frightened her, yet it warmed her heart with a hope she hadn't felt in months. Days rolled by, falling into rhythm. Clara tended the household, freeing Jack and Obey to work the horses. She discovered an herb garden behind the cabin, long neglected, and began reviving it, grateful to see familiar plants her father had once used. A week after her arrival, Jack rode up with a paper in hand. He found her hanging laundry in the sun. "Clara," he called, holding out the folded telegram your aunts sent word. "It just came in," Jack Rawlins said, handing Clara Belle Monroe the folded telegram. Her fingers shook as she opened it, dreading the words. She read the clipped message once, then again, before lowering it slowly. Relieved, you are safe. Stop regret to inform you relocating to Chicago, end of month. Stop, husband's business requires move. Stop, cannot accommodate you. Stop, will write new address when settled. Stop, Aunt Virginia. Clara's voice was hollow. She's moving to Chicago. She can't take me in. Jack studied her, his expression carrying both sympathy and something deeper she couldn't place. I'm sorry, he said gently. That leaves you in a hard spot. I have nowhere to go, Clara admitted, the weight of it crashing over her. No family. No prospects. You've got here, Jack answered quietly. Stay at the R as long as you need. She searched his face. I can't impose on you forever, Jack. It's no burden, he insisted. You've been a blessing around the place. Obey says the cabin hasn't looked this good since it was built. His voice softened. And truth be told, I've liked having you here. Heat rose in Clara's cheeks. I've liked being here too. Then stay, he said simply. At least until you know what you want next. Clara nodded slowly. All right. Thank you. That evening over supper, Jack cleared his throat. I've been thinking. Silver Creek's growing fast. Families pouring in, yet the nearest doctor's 2 days away in Tucson. Clara tilted her head. What are you saying? You've got medical know-how? Jack said, his eyes alight. Not fancy, but enough to set bones deliver babies' patch wounds. Folks need that. It'd give you independent, steady work. Clara hesitated, though the idea stirred something inside her. Do you think people would accept a woman in that role? Out here, results matter more than rules, Jack said. Besides, most women would rather trust another woman with certain matters. She chewed her lip. I'd need supplies. Medicines. We'll order what you need from Tucson, Jack said eagerly. I've got savings. We'll use that to get you started. I couldn't take your money. Call it an investment. Once you're on your feet, you can pay me back. His eyes held hers. Clara, I know this isn't the life you dreamed of, but it's a chance to build something that matters. She looked around the small homestead that had become her refuge, then back at the man whose kindness had saved her from ruin. This wasn't charity. It was trust, maybe even partnership. I'll do it, she said firmly. I'll be Silver Creek's healer. Jack's grin spread wide, lighting his whole face. You won't regret it. The next morning, they rode into Silver Creek. Jack timed it so Darius Kane would be busy at his mine, not spoiling the day with a fight. Clara saw the town with new eyes, not as the place of her shame, but a community in need. At the general store, Jack introduced her to the proprietor, a genial fellow named Davis. When he heard of her plans, his eyes lit up. My wife's expecting our fourth come spring. Having someone right here instead of praying the Tucson doc shows up, why, that's a godsend. Word spread fast. By the time they reached the empty building, Jack thought might serve as a clinic. Several women had already stopped Clara with questions about her experience. It's nothing grand, Jack said, as he opened the door to the old assayer's office. Dust lay thick inside, but it's central and rent's fair. Clara walked through the rooms, already picturing the front as a waiting space, the back as an exam room, shelves stocked with medicines. It's perfect, she declared. Jack's eyes brightened. Really just needs a bit of scrubbing a few chairs. She turned toward him, overwhelmed by his steady belief in her. Thank you, Jack, for everything. Before he could answer, the doorway darkened. A bulky figure leaned there, blocking the light. Well, well, Darius Kane drawled, his eyes sliding from Jack to Clara. Ain't this cozy? The cowboy hero and his little auction prize settlin' in my town. Jack stepped forward, shielding Clara. We're leaving Kane. No need for trouble. Trouble Kane feigned innocence. I'm just welcoming Silver Creek's newest resident. His eyes crawled over Clara, making her stomach knot. Though if I'd known what was under that sack, I'd have bid $1,000, maybe more. That's enough. Jack's snapped voice tight with anger. Kane smirked. Funny thing is, I own this building. Don't recall giving permission to rent it. Davis said it was open. Jack replied evenly. We spoke to him this morning. Davis don't speak for me. Darius, Kane growled. And I've decided this building ain't up for rent, not to the likes of you. Clara Belle Monroe stepped forward, ignoring Jack Rawlins' steadying hand. Mr. Kane, I aim to open a medical practice here in Silver Creek. Your own workers, your families, they'd all benefit. Kane's eyes narrowed. A lady doctor. That'll be the day. Healer Clara corrected firmly. And yes, a woman. Who do you think tends women in childbirth? Who nurses sick children? Women have been healers since the dawn of time. Mr. Kane. For a heartbeat, Kane seemed rattled. Then his expression hardened again. Call yourself what you will, this place ain't for rent. And if you're wise, you and Rawlins will be on your way before something unfortunate happens. Jack's voice was quiet, but carried steel. That a threat, Kane's grin revealed his tobacco-stained teeth. Just neighborly advice. Silver Creek can be mighty unforgiving to folks who forget their place. He tipped his hat in mock courtesy. Good day. When he left, silence hung heavy. I should have figured he'd meddle, Jack muttered. Clara straightened her shoulders. If not this building, we'll find another. I won't let a bully chase me off. Jack regarded her with newfound admiration. You keep surprising me, Clara Belle Monroe. They spent the rest of the day searching. By dusk, they struck a deal with the hotel owner, Mrs. Whitman, a stout, gray-haired woman who'd served as midwife for 2 decades. My hands ain't what they used to be, she told Clara, but I'll gladly send folks your way, maybe even lend a hand when needed. By the time Jack and Clara rode back to the Double R that evening, plans were in place for her to see patients within the week. Jack had already ordered supplies from Tucson, and Mrs. Whitman promised to spread word among Silver Creek's women. Riding home beneath the crimson glow of the setting sun, Clara felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known since her father's death. And riding beside her, solid, steady, and watchful, was a man who'd given her more than freedom. He'd given her hope. She stole a glance at Jack's strong profile, at the quiet strength etched into every line of his face. The thought stirred something in her. She hadn't dared imagine a future that might include him. As they dismounted, their hands brushed, sending a spark through Clara that left her heart racing. She told herself some answers could wait. The land itself would decide in time. Weeks slipped by in a whirlwind as Clara set up her practice. The small room beside the hotel became a clinic, shelves stocked with medicines, a curtained corner for examinations, a desk lined with neat records. Word traveled fast. Miners' wives came first, hesitant at the start, then more boldly as her gentle touch and sound remedies won trust. Soon mothers brought children grateful to avoid the long trek to Tucson. Even men began seeking her out after she set a miner's broken arm and pulled a bullet from a cowboy shot in a card game. Her reputation was sealed. Most mornings Jack rode her into town, and most evenings he brought her home, his quiet concern unshaken despite her assurances that Kane seemed to have vanished. Truth was, Darius had left for business in Tucson shortly after their clash. One evening in late October, as the trail stretched golden before them, Jack broke the easy silence. Harvest Festival's next weekend, he said, eyes on the horizon. Whole town shows up dancing food games for the young ones. It sounds wonderful. Clara answered, waiting for more. Jack cleared his throat. I was hoping you might join me. As my guest. He finally turned to her, steady and direct. As the woman I'm courting, if you'll have me. The breath caught in Clara's chest. Weeks of unspoken feelings lay between them, and now here they were. I would like that very much, Jack, she said softly. His smile broke across his face like dawn chasing the dark. Good. That's real good. They rode on in silence, but it was a silence alive with promise. The night of the Harvest Festival came crisp and clear. A full moon lit up the town square, strung with lanterns, tables heavy with food music ringing out as couples twirled across the dance floor. Clara wore a deep blue calico dress Mrs. Whitman had helped alter her copper hair, pinned in a way that was both festive and practical. When Jack arrived to escort her, the look in his eyes sent warmth straight to her cheeks. You look beautiful, Jack, Rawlins said plainly, offering his arm. He'd cleaned up for the night, fresh shirt vest, pressed neat, his dark hair slicked back, and his jaw smooth from a careful shave. As they stepped into the festival, a few women cast admiring glances his way, but Jack only had eyes for Clara Belle Monroe. They danced, shared food, and mingled among townsfolk, who now greeted her as Doc Monroe. Even Davis from the general store proudly introduced his heavily pregnant wife, as if Clara's presence was somehow his doing. As the evening wore on, Jack led her toward a quiet corner beneath a towering cottonwood at the edge of the square, the fiddles and laughter drifting in the background. Are you enjoying yourself? He asked, his hand still wrapped around hers from their last dance. Very much, Clara said softly. It's wonderful to see everyone together like this. It is, Jack agreed. Though truth be told, I'm mostly enjoying watching you. You've become part of this town, Clara. People look to you now. Her smile was tender. I never expected to find a place here. When I left Boston, I thought I was running away. But now, maybe I was heading toward something instead. She looked straight at him, courage building. Toward you. Jack's expression softened the emotion in his eyes, making her chest tighten. Clara, he began, but the moment was shattered by shouting near the saloon. A knot of drunken men spilled into the street. At their center swaggered Darius Kane, fresh back from Tucson and already spoiling for a fight. His gaze locked on Jack and Clara, and he staggered their way with a sneer. Rawlins Kane bellowed loud enough to hush the music nearby. Still playing house with your little auction prize? Jack stepped forward, jaw tight. You're drunk, Kane. Sleep it off. Kane ignored him, his bleary eyes fixed on Clara. He only bought you 'cause he was too yellow to let a real man have you. Bet he ain't even touched you yet, too scared to treat you like a woman ought to be treated. Clara flinched at the vile words, but stood tall. Mr. Kane, you're making a fool of yourself. These good people came to celebrate, not watch your tantrum. Don't you lecture me, woman, Kane roared, waving an arm at the gathering crowd. This is my town, my people. You exploited Silver Creek, Jack cut in his voice, low and steady. You don't own this town or anyone in it. Kane's hand dropped to the revolver at his hip. I own whatever I say I own, Rawlins, including that woman if I decide I want her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jack's shoulders tensed, his voice calm but firm. Go home, Kane, before you do something you can't undo. For a breath, it seemed Kane might back down. Then his hand closed on his pistol. Too late for that, cowboy. Everything happened in a blur. Kane yanked his gun, but whiskey had slowed his draw. Jack's Colt was out in a flash, one shot, cracking through the night. The sound echoed off the buildings as Kane staggered, shock etched across his face before blood bloomed across his shirt. He collapsed hard into the dirt. The square went deathly still. Then Clara's training took over. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands pressing against the wound. "He's alive," she called. "Get my medical bag now!" Men scrambled to obey. Jack stood frozen, revolver still in his fist, as others carried Kane into Clara's small clinic. For hours, she worked her hands steady, though her body screamed with exhaustion. When she finally stepped outside, blood-stained and drained, Jack was waiting on the porch, worry carved deep in his face. "He'll live," Clara said before he could ask. "The bullet missed anything vital. He's lost blood, but with care he'll pull through." Relief swept over Jack. "Thank God, Clara. I didn't want to kill him, I just reacted." "You had no choice," she told him, sinking onto the bench beside him. Everyone saw he drew first. It was self-defense. Jack nodded through the guilt still weighed heavy. "Sheriff already came by, said the same. No charges." "But Clara..." He looked down, seeing dried blood still under her nails. He reached for her hand. "I'm sorry you had to go through that, saving the very man who threatened you." She squeezed his hand gently. "It's what I do, Jack. My father taught me you don't choose who deserves healing." Silence fell heavy and raw until Jack spoke again, his voice rough with feeling. "When he pulled that gun, all I could think was that he might hurt you, that I might lose you before I ever had the chance to..." "To what?" Clara prompted softly. Jack turned fully toward her, brown eyes fierce in the moonlight. "To love you proper. To build a life with you." He drew a long breath. "I know it seems sudden. We've only known each other a few months. But when you've lost what we both have, you recognize what matters when you find it again." Clara's heart swelled at his words, the truth of them ringing in her very bones. "It's not too soon?" Clara Belle Monroe whispered. "Not when you know. And do you know?" Instead of answering, Jack Rawlins lowered his head and her lips found his. The kiss began soft, hesitant, then deepened until his arms circled her, pulling her close against him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, and Clara could feel the hammering of his heart beneath her hand. "I know," she said simply. Jack rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me, Clara. Not just as a guest or a friend, but as the woman who will share my life. We can make it official when the circuit preacher rides through next month." "Yes," Clara replied, without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." Silver Creek buzzed soon after, not only about Darius Kane's shooting, but about Jack Rawlins and Clara Belle Monroe's sudden engagement. Some whispered it was too soon after the violence. Others, who had watched their bond grow day by day, only nodded as if the news merely confirmed what they already believed. Kane himself, confined to a bed above the saloon, and tended by Clara's own hands, made no further threats. Whether it was his brush with death or the shame of his public defeat, something in him had shifted. When Jack stopped by a week later at Clara's urging, Kane admitted gruffly, "Should have minded my own business. This town's big enough for us all." It wasn't an apology, but it eased the tension Silver Creek had carried since that fateful night. Life rolled forward. Clara split her time between a busy clinic and planning her wedding. When the circuit preacher arrived on a bright November morning, the whole town gathered in the new church, the fresh pine walls still carrying the scent of sawdust. Clara wore cream silk sewn with tiny pearl buttons that had once belonged to Jack's mother. The finishing touches done by Mrs. Whitman and a circle of townswomen. Ob Finch stood as Jack's best man pride shining through the lines of his weathered face. To him, this was the son he'd never had now binding his life to a woman no one could have imagined would step down from an auction block and into their hearts. "I, Jack Rawlins, take you Clara Belle Monroe to be my lawful wedded wife." Jack's steady voice carried through the crowded church. "To have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. Clara repeated her vows, green eyes locked on his unwavering. When the preacher declared them man and wife, the cheer that erupted nearly shook the rafters. Music and dancing spilled out into the square, food and laughter lasting well into the night. As the sun dipped low, Jack and Clara slipped away, riding midnight back toward the double R, toward their home. She leaned against his chest as his arms wrapped around her, guiding the stallion. The land spread before them, bathed in gold by the fading light. "Happy Mrs. Rawlins," Jack murmured against her hair. "Happier than I ever dreamed," she whispered. His kiss was tender, a promise of all the years to come. "When I lifted that sack and saw your face," he said quietly, "I thought I'd seen an angel. Never imagined you'd be my wife." "Maybe it was meant to be," Clara said softly. "Every step, even the darkest ones, led me to you." "Then I'm grateful for every mile," Jack replied, urging midnight into a gentle canter as the first stars pricked the sky. 5 years later, the double R had grown with them. The cabin was larger now, with a proper kitchen, a big bedroom, and 2 small rooms for the children who filled their world, 3-year-old James and little Elizabeth, named for the woman Jack had once lost. The ranch itself stretched wider, the herds, bigger horses and cattle alike, grazing across new acres. Ob still lived close in a snug cabin Jack had built, more often found bouncing the children on his knee than breaking horses. Clara moved her practice home, working from a tidy building Jack had raised near the house. She saw patients 3 days a week, balancing medicine and motherhood with a rhythm that suited her. Silver Creek had changed too. No longer just a mining camp, it now boasted a schoolhouse, a bank, and even a small newspaper. Darius Kane, chastened but not defeated, had turned some of his fortune toward civic projects, even funding the new school more for business than charity. But it helped nonetheless. On a warm spring afternoon, Clara sat on the porch watching Jack teach little James to ride a spotted pony chosen just for him. The boy clung to the saddle horn, his father's steady hand on the reins, while Elizabeth toddled in the grass under Ob's watchful eye. The ranch, the family, the town, it had all grown from hardship into something beautiful. And at the center of it all, Jack and Clara knew they'd built more than a home. They'd built a life worth every struggle it had taken to reach it. Elizabeth played at Clara Belle Monroe's feet, stacking little wooden blocks Jack Rawlins had carved through the long winter nights. Clara watched from the porch as her husband guided their boy in the saddle, his steady hands keeping James upright. A deep wave of contentment washed over her. The road that had brought her here had been rough and cruel, yet she wouldn't trade a single step of it, not if it meant losing what she held now. Jack looked up, caught her gaze, and gave her that same warm smile that had once sparked hope in her darkest hour. He lifted James from the pony and set him atop his shoulders, striding toward the house with the boys' delighted laughter echoing across the yard. Mama James called. "I rode like Papa," I saw Clara answered, her heart swelling with pride. "You're a natural horseman, just like your father." Jack set the boy down and took a seat beside her, pulling Elizabeth onto his lap. He pressed a kiss to the little girl's dark curls. "He did well," Jack agreed. "Though I've got a notion this one may outride him yet. She studies those horses like she's already sizing them up." Clara laughed. "She's observant like her father." "Stubborn like her mother," Jack countered with a grin. As the children played together on the porch, Jack reached for Clara's hand, his expression shifting serious. "I had a letter from Nathaniel today. Catherine's expectant again. They'd like us to come to Colorado after the baby's born this summer." "That would be wonderful," Clara said. "The children would love to meet their cousins." Jack nodded. "I was thinking we could make a proper trip of it. See some country. Maybe even show you the bit of Missouri on the way back, the places that raised me before I came west." Clara's fingers tightened around his. "I'd like that. To see where your story began." Jack's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You know, I still shake my head at how it all turned out. That day in Silver Creek when I saw them drag you up on that auction block." He paused, jaw tightening at the memory. I knew I had to act. Never guessed I was saving the woman who'd be my wife, the mother of my children. My hero, Clara, teased gently, though truth lingered in the jest. Jack's tone grew firm. "No. You're the hero, Clara. You survived when most would have broken. You built a life from ashes. You heal the sick, bring new life into the world, raise our children with love. I just happened to be the fool lucky enough to lift that sack and find not an angel, but my heart's companion." Clara leaned into his touch, eyes brimming with the love that had only deepened over the years. "We saved each other, Jack. And we'll keep doing it every day we're given." The sun sank behind the mountains, painting the sky in blazing hues of orange and gold. The double R stretched before them, a living testament to grit, hope, and love. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound echoing across the valley. Other lives unfolded beyond the horizon, other stories etched into the wide frontier. But here, on this corner of Arizona wilderness, Clara and Jack had carved something rare and enduring, a home, a family, a love born from the unlikeliest of beginnings, now stronger than they ever imagined. Clara rested her head on Jack's shoulder, secure in the knowledge that whatever storms lay ahead, they'd face them side by side. From auction block to altar, from strangers to soulmates, their path had been extraordinary, and their journey was far from done. As the first stars pricked the sky, Jack pressed a kiss to her temple. "Happy," he whispered, same as he had on their wedding night. And as she had then, Clara answered from the deepest part of her heart, "Happier than I ever thought possible." It was enough. It was everything. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.